Good morning. My name is Peyton, and I am one of the business tax specialists in our customer service bureau. Thank you for joining us for the Wisconsin Department of Revenue My Tax Account Annual Refresher webinar. Today, we are going to cover the initial and two-step login, the filing and paying of sales and use tax and withholding tax, including the WT6, WT7 annual reconciliation, as well as the submission of W-2s and 1099s, along with some other areas where our customer service representatives get the most questions. If you have any questions, please ask them through the questions pane throughout the webinar, and we will respond to you individually. If you have questions in the future, or questions that may require some more time, please go to our website, call, or email the Wisconsin Department of Revenue customer service team. The recording will be available on the Wisconsin Department of Revenue training page shortly after the webinar. We have planned this webinar for about an hour, and presenting today is Tom Ryban, our Quality Assurance Coordinator in the Customer Service Bureau. We will start things off today with Tom.
Thank you, Peyton. And I'll add my welcome to the My Tax Account Annual Refresher webinar. For today's webinar, we'll be working in a training and testing environment, and there may be some differences in screen appearance. Please be aware if you're working along in My Tax Account, you're in a live environment, and we ask that you don't submit any returns or requests that you complete in this webinar. If you accidentally submit a return or request, please contact customer service at 608 261 5338 for assistance deleting the return or request. Before we log in, we'd like to point out some helpful training videos you can access from the login page. We'll click on Business Videos from the Resources panel. The videos range from general, such as MTA overview, to specific, such as how to file and pay sales and use tax. Let's go back to the login page. Also note that you can reset your password by following this forgot username or password link, or to have your username emailed to you. All right, let's log in. We'd like to mention that although you may have until the last day of the month to file your return, it might be beneficial to try and log into My Tax Account ahead of time. That way, if you have any difficulty with receiving a security code, you then have time to resolve any issues before filing and paying taxes. Internal servers and the security settings of your business email system may delay or even prevent you from receiving the security code via email. If your business has such email filters, you'll want to add MTA support at wisconsin.gov as a trusted email address. Contact your computer support area or your email provider for assistance. That email address again is MTA support at wisconsin.gov. Please don't send any questions to this email address, as that email box isn't monitored for responses. It's only used for electronic delivery of security codes. So if this is your first time logging into My Tax Account, you would now be asked to set up a delivery method for your security code via text, email, or an authenticator app. If you have it set up to receive your security code as text or email, the default will be to send it via text. If you do wish to receive an email, we can click on the More Security Code Delivery options, and then you can choose to receive your security code as an email. Oops. Prior to clicking Confirm, after populating the security code, which we can do in our training and testing environment, we can click on Trust this device. By doing so, a subsequent entry of a security code wouldn't be required unless you log in with a computer that you've never used before or you've deleted your cookies. And let's click on confirm to log in. All right, and now we're in my tax account. Before we look at specific sections, just a couple of things on navigation. If you click on any link or anytime that you're in a different spot in my tax account, to go back home to the home page, just click on the words My Tax Account at the top of the screen. I'll do that here. And when you're navigating in my tax account, and I'll just click on this link again just for an example, if you want to go back a page, you can typically find a back arrow here, or you can just use the back arrow on your browser. All right, let's take a closer look at some of the tabs that are available here and what they mean to you as a My Tax Account user. You'll notice that it defaulted to the Summary tab here. And before we talk about what's on the Summary tab, I'll just point out what's underneath the Favorites tab. If you have a lot of accounts in my tax account, what you can do is you can delete some of those if it's not an account that you actively manage. So I'll click on manage, and let's say I only file the sales and use tax. So what I can do is I can click on sales and use tax, click on OK, and then when I log in, this is the only account that I'm going to see as the default. I can still see all of the other accounts if I click on the summary tab, but this is how it would look when you logged in. Let me go back and I'll undo that. And we'll go back to the summary tab, which is what probably most people have as set as their default. A couple of things in the summary tab, it's going to list your business tax accounts here. And it's also going to list the filing frequency for that particular account. So for example, sales and use tax here is quarterly and withholding tax is quarterly as well. For the business tax registration account, not really a tax account, but if you have to pay a renewal fee every 2 years, for example, this is where you can view what you have paid, and you can also make that $10 renewal payment, for example. We're going to take a closer look at the sales and use tax account, withholding tax account, and actually do some filing a little bit later on in the webinar, so we'll take a look at what these links mean. Well, let's take a look at the next tab over the Action Center. So the Action Center tells you if you have any unread messages, any unread letters, and it also allows you to update your mail delivery options. This can be done from the Settings tab as well. And in fact, let's click on the Settings tab and we'll take a look at it from there. So here's where you can update your mail delivery option. The default is paper. And if I click on that, what that would allow me to do is to receive those notices electronically versus snail mail. Before you change to electronic, make sure that you read these terms here carefully. And if you want to, you can just click on electronic, and then you can click on save to change to electronic mail delivery. At any point in time, you can just come back to this screen and change that back. Let's click on the More tab and see what's there. So once I click on the More tab, the first panel is Payments and Returns. And the first link is Manage Payments and Returns. Now, while this link sounds like it's where you would go for filing a return, it's actually more useful for researching possibly past payments or returns. We'll recommend for filing and paying a return to click on the specific account to file from the My Tax Account homepage. And we'll look at an example of that, how to do that in a few moments. The next link is Request a Payment Plan, and that's used for accounts that are in collections. And the View Payment Breakdown is also mainly used for accounts in collections. Pay real estate transfer fees are used by municipalities. And View or Cancel Scheduled Payments. If you schedule a payment for a future date and it hasn't processed yet, you can cancel that payment here. And what you'll notice is this link is available at a number of different places in My Tax Account if you need to cancel a payment that hasn't processed. Moving over to the Letters panel, I'll click on View Letters. One thing I'd like to point out here, if you do have a seller's permit, for example, if you need a copy of that, it's pretty likely that there may be a copy of your seller's permit in your letters folder in this particular link. And If you have a business tax account with us, the business tax registration certificate should also be in the letters. So let's head on back. View messages is pretty self-explanatory. Any messages that we send you would be in the messages folder. And then search submissions. Let me click on that. What you're going to see in the search submissions is any submissions that you've done via My Tax Account. And what it's going to show are deleted submissions. They'll show processed submissions, but what it'll also show is pending submissions. We don't have any pending submissions yet, but after I file a sales and use tax return in a few moments, then the pending tab would show up because I would then have a pending submission. It will also show a draft submission. So if I save my sales and use tax return, for example, and don't submit it, there will also be a draft tab here. Well, let's go back. And this search submissions link will be at a number of different places on my tax account as well, at the account level on the home page as well, so easy to find. The Enter W-2 1099 information link, we're going to take a closer look at that when we talk about withholding tax later on in the webinar. And manage names and addresses. Here you can update a DBA address or add a DBA address, for example, and update addresses as well. Let's head on back. And that covers those panels. So let's head on back home. And we don't have another tab here, but we do have another important link to take a look at, and that is Manage My Profile. So let's click on that. And underneath Manage My Profile, what you'll see here is, whoops, let me go back, hang on just a second. I do have another tab that I missed. Oh no, we got it all. I apologize. Let me go back. And I was right. Let's go to Manage My Profile. We did cover the More tab. And the default here is to the Profile tab. And what you'll find here is what you would guess that you would find underneath the Profile tab. You see your username is here, your name is here, your profile email address, and you can update these from this particular tab. You can change your password, update a secret question, and you can change your two-step authentication delivery method here. I'll click on that just to give you a look at what that is. So if your email changes or your text changes, you can change that here. Notice there's not a change button per se. You would need to delete the old one by clicking on the X. That'll delete the old one, and then you'll be able to add the new one. Let's head on back. And let's click on the Action Center tab. And underneath the Action Center tab, you have another avenue to view messages. And then let's click on the More tab. And after I click on the More tab, let's take a look at the Request Additional Access panel here. The first link that's listed is Request Access to an Account. Let's click on that. And after I click on that, it's going to ask, well, what kind of account do you want to add here? Well, we're talking about business taxes in this webinar, so we're going to click on business accounts. We want to add a business account to our My Tax account, and I'll click on next. But let's talk a little bit about why you would use this link. This is where you would go to add access to an additional tax account than what you have on My Tax account. For example, as a new business, you may just have been registered for sales and use tax. But as the business grows, you now need to hire employees. Well, you'd go to our website and you'd register for a withholding tax account via the online registration on our website. And then once that's processed, you'll be assigned a withholding tax account, but it won't automatically appear in My Tax account. This is where you would add that withholding account to your existing My Tax account profile. And this is the page where you would add that. So what we're going to do here is you would choose a business tax type, and you would enter one of two things to really verify that you're associated with the business. will ask you to enter a total tax due from prior return or deposit report. And if I click on that, it'll add a little bit more detail there and say one of the 3 most recently filed returns reports. So we're asking for one of those 3 amounts as a security checkpoint, if you will. Or you can enter a letter ID, and I'll click on that, and it gives a listing here of different letters that you could use here again as verification. The most common one would be the business tax registration greeting letter. We mail that out whenever you register for withholding tax or a sales tax account, and it's a letter that says, "Thank you for registering with the Department of Revenue," is the first line of the body on that letter. So you could input either one of these, and once you do that and click on next and submit, you'd have immediate access to that, that added business tax account. We're not going to do that right now, but let's go back and see what else we have on that page. The next link is request access to a third-party account. This is where a third-party preparer would go to request access to your tax accounts. So what they would do is they would go here and they would add clients to their current client list. So third parties would use this, but this would also be used by individuals that might own multiple entities and would like to manage all of the entities under a single My Tax Account profile. Let's head on back. And we'll move on to manage payment sources. Let's take a look at that. So if you take a look at manage payment sources, if you have a saved payment source, this is where you would go to delete that payment source if you change banks. You can add a payment source here, but most of the time that'll be done when you make the first payment. And what I might do here is, well, I'll show you how you can delete a payment source. Let's say you change financial institutions, you no longer have this banking account. Well, you don't want to choose it by accident and try to do a withdrawal from a closed account. So to delete a saved payment source, you would click on it and click on remove this payment source. It'll ask for confirmation and I'll say yes. And what will happen is when I go to file and pay the first sales and use tax return, I'll add a new payment source at that time so you can see how that gets added while you're paying a return. Let's head on back. And here's another opportunity to view messages. And let's take a look at the Manage Access panel. And we'll click on first the Manage My Access link. Here you can, let's get her opened up. Here you can manage access to your business tax accounts. So these are the accounts that I have on my tax account, and if I wanted to, I could change the access to them. And it also tells us that I'm the master account user. So there's typically, or not typically, there is one master account user per business account, and everybody that is not a master typically is going to be an account manager, but I'm the master account holder for this business. Let's head back. And let's click on Manage My Users Access. This particular feature, subtitled secondary usernames, is not something that you're not going to use. In most cases, you're going to use the request third-party access. I'll just give a brief overview of what this is and the reason why you probably wouldn't use it. It's really only going to be used by a larger accounting firm. As an example, if a large accounting firm had 50 employees servicing 1,000 client accounts, they can create groups of clients and assign those groups to specific employee user accounts that they create. So it's really not geared to the everyday user. Let's head back. And let's click on Manage Other Users Access. Now, since I'm the master account holder, I have functions that an account manager won't see, meaning that I can see who else is signed up for this business. And you can see that there are 2 account managers that are signed up for this business. One of them is active, this user 1. The one that's grayed out is my tax account that is inactive currently because it's grayed out. So I can change the access for this particular user to my tax account. What also would be showing here is if there was a third-party preparer that had access to my business tax accounts, that would also show here. Let's head on back. The other functions here underneath Manage Access, delete my profile, inactivates your profile. So if you're leaving the business, you could close your account. And close account, so click on that. This is another link that's in several different places on my tax account. And this means when it says close account, it means you're gonna close one of the business tax accounts is what it's really saying. So if you wanted to close your withholding tax account, you'll see that you could close your withholding tax account from that link. Let's head on back. And here again is that search submissions link we looked at earlier. And login activity, if I click on that, it just shows when I logged into my account. And let's head back. Let's go back to the home page. And let's take a closer look at the sales and use tax account. And if we take a look at sales and use, as I mentioned earlier, we're a quarterly filer. We have a few functions here, file, pay, view returns, and we're going to access that momentarily. But again, here's another link to view submissions, to view mail that's specific to sales and use tax, and here you can close the sales tax account if you wanted to. But let's click on File, Pay, View Returns is where you're gonna probably do most of your work. So as I said, we're a quarterly filer, so our fourth quarter is due by the end of January, and it indicates that it hasn't been filed yet or processed, so file now would take us to that return. But before we do that, I'd like to point out some other helpful links on this page in the upper right-hand portion. If we click on filing and payment history, that tells us, well, just what it describes. It shows filing and payment history for this particular account broken down by period. You can search for specific periods if you wanted to as well. You could just search for tax year 2018, 2019 if you wanted to. So it allows you to set those parameters. View account attributes, and just as more informational, tells us we're a quarterly filer and when the account started. But appeal is a link that you possibly might use in the future. If for whatever reason you get a late filing fee for late filing penalty, for example, you can appeal any late filing penalties right from my tax account by using the appeal link. Another place where you can close the account. And here's request extension to file. You can request a 30-day extension to file your return. Keep in mind for this request though, it needs to be done prior to the due date, but this payment is still due timely to prevent any interest charges. And here again is another link to view or cancel scheduled payments. All right, looks like we're ready to file a return. So we're going to file the fourth quarter, file and pay the fourth quarter sales and use tax return. But first, we're going to file it. I'll click on File Now, and that'll take us to the first page of that Form ST12 to file the sales and use tax. First, I'll point out there's helpful links here. Here's the link to the sales and use tax video, which is about 4 minutes long on how to file a sales and use tax return, and we're going to do that live here in the webinar. Form instructions for the ST12 report, common sales and use tax questions, and the sales tax rate chart, which the chart shows each county in Wisconsin and their sales tax rates. Now the default here is do you plan to report 0 on every line? The default is no, because that's what most people do, have something to report. But if you didn't have anything to report for the fourth quarter, you could click on yes, click on next, and it just fills in all zeros for you, and you can just go ahead and submit that. So very easy to file a 0 return. Go back though, and we're going to change it back to answer no to that question, the default, because we will just file a simple sales and use tax return. So I'll click on next, and total sales, I'll just put a nice round number. So once I put in total sales, you'll notice that it's automatically calculating for me. You can't change this number, the system automatically calculates. And then for lines 2, 3, 4, and 5, you would put in any applicable subtractions to your total sales. These are kind of self-explanatory here. One thing that you might have to do for other is if the $50,000 includes the sales tax, you'll want to subtract that the amount of sales tax out in line 5. All right, so we're looking good here. Let's go to next. And purchases subject to state use tax. We don't have any. We'll leave the default at 0. If you have questions about use tax, there's a link here, or you can just go to our website and use the keyword use tax for any common questions. I'll click on next. And next we have county tax. So in most cases, you'll have county tax to report. You could change it to no. So if you're in one of the few counties that don't have a county tax and all your sales are in that county, you wouldn't have to put any county tax in. But for our purposes here, we will add an amount to a county. Not all the counties necessarily are going to be listed here. It's based on what you filed the last time. So you don't have to add counties each time. If you don't have any sales for a county, just leave it at 0. If a county is not listed that you want to add, just click in the last empty box and you'll get a drop down of all the Wisconsin counties, and you can certainly add a county anytime. We'll just put all of our sales for brevity's sake in Dane County. And if you remember, we didn't have any use tax, so we would pull that forward if indeed we did have use tax to report. And we'll click on next. Do you have any stadium tax to report? That ended a few years ago, so the default is no. So we'll leave that at no and click on next. And that's going to take us to a summary page. So you'll see automatically calculated state and county tax. There's no stadium sales, no use tax. It is applying a discount. So if you file and pay timely, you will get a discount for doing so. And sums up everything. It will allow you to get an email. I'll change it to yes to getting a confirmation email once this is submitted. And we're looking good. So we're going to submit this now. And these are the attestation for the terms. I'll click on OK for that. And what that's going to do is take us to a confirmation page. So you'll be assigned a confirmation number. It confirms we filed for the last quarter of 2022. But we got a confirmation number for filing the return. We haven't made a payment yet. So that's going to be our next step. If you take a look at a couple of things here, you can print this confirmation page. You can print the submission. So if you wanted to print off a form, the form itself, you could do that now. You can do that. You can go back into past periods and do that anytime from My Tax Account. You can create a printable voucher. So if you're going to mail a check, if you choose create a printable voucher, that voucher will be created and will be in your letters folder. Most people are going to do it electronically, so I'll click on make a payment. And most people choose direct debit, where we're just going to pull it from checking or savings account. There is a credit card option, and new for 2023, PayPal and Apple Pay have also been added, so that's something that's new. And here again, we give you another opportunity to create a printable voucher. So we're going to choose direct debit, click next, confirming that we're making a return payment to sales tax, and we'll go to next. And since I deleted that payment source underneath the example of, we have a different account, let's add a new payment source. So the new payment source is checking, and then it's asking for their routing number and account number. And just like the security code for testing and training purposes in our system, I can just populate a random number here for the purposes of just moving forward in the webinar, and it'll pick a random account here. Of course, you'd put in your own routing number, and I'll just create a fictitious account number. And now it's asking if I want to save this payment source. And I'm going to say yes to that and use default name. Yes, that's perfectly fine. Would I like a confirmation email? Sure. And the other thing I'll point out here is in the text box below. The payment needs to be submitted before 4 p.m. Central Time for it to be timely. So on the due date, it needs to be, that's the kind of the magic hour, if you will, for filing a payment timely. Because if you take a look at the payment itself here, even though it's January 12th, I can click on the little calendar. Since this payment isn't due until January 31st, I could choose January 31st, and that's when it would be pulled from my checking account. For our purposes today, I'll just leave the default at January 12th, confirm the amount. And it looks like we're ready to submit. So I'll click on submit. And yes. And now we've got a confirmation number for making the return payment. So for sales and use tax, I'll get a confirmation number for filing the sales tax return and for making the payment. All right, so let's return home. And once I return home, let's take a look at that submissions screen again, because now notice earlier we had deleted and processed, but now we've got a pending tab there because my return payment and return itself are pending because we just submitted them. They have not fully processed yet. All right, let's return home. And now let's switch gears to withholding tax. And for withholding tax, we really got the same options here that we did for sales and use tax. Again, we're a quarterly filer in our example here for withholding tax, but we're also in January. So in addition to filing the last WT6 for tax year 2022, we need to file the WT7 annual reconciliation and any W-2s or 1099s that may be have withholding or that don't have withholding, technically speaking. So when we go to this page, what we first need to tackle is the WT6, that final WT6 for tax year 2022. And we're going to file that. Keep in mind, if you're an annual filer, you haven't been filing WT6s throughout the year, and you don't have that filing requirement. An annual filer for withholding just files the WT7 at the end of the year and makes a payment at the end of the year by January 31st for an annual filer. So what we're going to do is click on File WT6 Return here to get that last one filed. And it'll take us to this page. Again, it asks us if we're going to file a zero report, which we could change it to that. Would you like to make a payment? Yes. But the default is yes, because most people are going to be making a payment. And I'm going to just put in a round number here of $100. So we're filing a WT6 report and payment for $100 for the fourth quarter of 2022. I'll click next. And the default is paid by direct debit here. I could choose other forms of payment. If I did choose to pay by credit card, for example, I'll just click on that briefly. What it would do is allow us to do that, but we would, again, it would be more similar to a sales tax return than where I'd be filing a return and making a payment. Same thing by paying by check or money order. We would create a voucher and mail that in. So that also would be a little bit more similar to sales tax, but really in the vast majority of cases, it's going to be pay by direct debit. So that's the way that we're going to work it in our example. So since we saved a payment source earlier, you'll see that it's available here, and to make things easy, we'll just choose that payment source so I don't have to key in that information again. Again, the text box here indicating the payment is due by 4 p.m. on the due date. Again, I can change that date if I want to here, but we'll keep it at January 12th. I'll confirm the amount and click on next. Sure, I'll get an email, and I'll click on submit and agree to the terms. All right, and now I have a confirmation. So if you're paying by direct debit for WT6 for withholding tax, it's different from sales tax in that here we've made both the return payment and the return all in one action. So you're only getting one confirmation number when you're filing a WT6 when you choose direct debit. So we've satisfied the filing requirement here for that last WT6 for withholding tax. So let's go back home and let's take a closer look at the filing the WT7 for withholding tax. Let's go back here. So here's the WT7 for tax year 22, and this is how we code it in my tax account. So I'll click on File WT7 Return. So please note there's filing tips here as well. You've got form instructions for the WT7, common questions for withholding tax, and an EFW2 file transfer page as well here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few moments. Let's discuss a little bit though about filing the WT7. Let's discuss the scenario where you're required to file a WT7, but you have no withholding tax to report on your WT7, but you do have W-2s to report. For this scenario, you'll want to keep the default answer at no to the question on this page and submit the WT7 with 0 amounts. You'll still need to report the W-2s, and you can submit them to us from my tax account from the Enter W-2 1099 information link we're going to look at in a little bit, and that's on the More tab on the home page. So we'll take a look at that after we're done filing the WT7. So again, if you don't have any withholding, you'll leave the default at no, and I'll just click here and it's just going to automatically fill in zeros for you. But if you still have W-2s, like I said, you still need to get those W-2s to us. Let's continue and we'll discuss actually filing a WT7 with withholding. So I'll click on yes. And that brings us to 3 different options here because it's asking how are you going to submit the W-2s and 1099s to us. So first let's click on the My Tax Account button. The first option is to key in the W-2s right now while we're filing the WT7 by checking the My Tax Account button. So if you don't have a lot of them, of course, that's going to be, we give you an avenue in order to file those W-2s or 1099s right while you're filing the WT7. The second option is to use file transfer, and I'll click on file transfer. Please note that you'd also select file transfer if you've already entered the W-2s and 1099s prior to filing the WT7. But most people are going to choose file transfer because you're going to upload an electronic file to us. So if you are going to upload an electronic file to us, we're not going to go into detail on that in this webinar because it's a My Tax Account webinar, but this is what you would choose. If you have questions, you can certainly contact us, but what I'm going to show you is the file transfer that we're going to accept is an EFW2 file transfer, and there's a link on this page, and I'll just give a quick click on it. And those of you that use file transfer for W-2s, for example, this is the page that you would use to upload that file to us. If you do need to contact us about this type of file transfer, we have a specific email box that's dedicated to EFW2 file transfers. This DOR W2 data questions at wisconsin.gov is where you can send questions about this EFW2 file transfer. If you're just on our website and want to get to this page in the search box, you can just use keyword W2 file transfer, and the first option in the search will be to this page. So a handy page to look at, again, if you're going to use file transfer as your method to get us the W-2s. The third option is paper. So if you have 9 or less of a specific type of information returned, you can mail them to us. So if you had 9 W-2s and 9 1099 NECs, for example, you could mail those to us. Of course, we do want them electronically. It's a slicker system, but we still will accept them if there's less than 10. All right, so let's go back to my tax account, because what we are going to show is a W-T7 being filed with a single W-2 being filed while we're filing the W-T7. So to do that, I'm going to click on the My Tax Account button, and that tells my tax account that I am going to be inputting data from a W-2, at least one W-2 or 1099. And I'll click on Next. And the first question is, are you entering any W-2s? I'll answer yes to that. And you'll see that it's going to pull forward the information from your account. And we'll click on Add W-2. And it shows you basically an electronic version of a W-2. So for the purposes of the webinar, I'll just put in a fictitious SSN. And I'll just use the address here at our Madison location. And for brevity's sake, I'm not going to fill out every field on this W-2. Of course, this is a W-2 that you're submitting to us, so in reality, you would fill out every field that you have for that employee's W-2. But so you don't have to watch me type for 5 minutes. We'll just put in some basic information. The most important being Wisconsin wages and tips, and the amount of W-2 income tax withheld for the state of Wisconsin. For this particular employee or single employee, it was this amount. All right. And now I'll click on Add. So we've done one, and I can continue adding W-2s. If I could give you just a tip here, if you have multiple W-2s to add, so you don't lose anything if the computer crashes, you're getting a phone call and you get logged out. If you click on Save Draft and you click on Continue Editing, that'll automatically save this draft. So use that to your advantage. So you don't want to lose, if you key in 5 W-2s, you don't want to lose them. If you're going to come back later and finish keying them in, of course, there's a Finish Later option here. And then in that Search Submissions tab that we've looked at a couple of times, you would just then have a Draft tab, and then you can finish that submission later. We'll just continue editing here. So we have just that one employee with one W-2, so let's continue. But now it's going to give you an option to add 1099s that have withholding. And let's talk a little bit about 1099s. We only want you to list 1099s on this W-T7 that have withholding. So if there are 1099s that do not have withholding, we still do need those, but those would not be listed on the WT7 when you fill out the WT7 reconciliation at the end of the year. So in our scenario, we do not have any 1099 MISCs with withholding, so we'll leave the default at no. And the same thing applies for 1099 NECs. We do not have any 1099s with withholding. Let's continue. Same thing for a 1099R. And then we get to the WT7 itself. And again, here it reminds you that we only want the 1099s listed here with Wisconsin withholding. If you have one with withholding and 10 without, you're just going to put one here because we only want them with withholding. Okay, so what it did is it pulled forward from the W2 the amount that was held because we entered in the W2 during the while we're filing the WT7 here. And what the system wants here, what we want is now a quarterly breakdown from your payroll records. So I'm looking at my payroll records and I'll break that down by quarter. And let's talk about a little bit about that last WT6. So what we did here is we filed that last WT6 right before filing the WT7, and that's perfect. The WT6 doesn't have to fully process in order to file the WT7. So if you file and pay the WT6 and then turn around right away, just like we're doing here, and file the WT7, my tax account will like that. That's fine. So it does not have to fully process. So it looks like we're reconciling here. So everything's looking good. I'll click on next, and that'll take us to the last steps here. And if you don't file your WT6s via My Tax Account and use payroll software, and the payroll software, if we don't have that WT6 yet, you may get a reminder here saying, hey, file your WT6. That's not the case here, but that's perfectly fine. And looks like everything is good to go here. I'll click on next. And we get a summary. Everything reconciles. There's nothing overpaid or underpaid, so I'll submit. And I'll click on OK. And that takes us to the confirmation page. Since we reconciled, there's nothing that we need to pay. If you're an annual filer for withholding tax, you would need to make a payment here because you haven't been making payments throughout the year. So there would be a make a payment function on this particular page for an annual filer. All right, so let's head on back to the home page because there's a important link for some of you that we want to point out. So from the home page, if I click on the More tab, in the W-2 1099 submissions panel, let's click on the Enter W-2 1099 information link. So if you need to report W-2s or 1099s with or without withholding, or file a corrected W-2 or 1099, you can do that using the Enter W-2 1099 information link. This tool can be especially helpful for those of you that don't even have a withholding tax account with us, but need to submit W-2s or 1099s to the department that don't have Wisconsin withholding. Keep in mind, though, that this satisfies the state filing requirement, not the federal filing requirement for information returns. Also, these forms aren't printable either. But let's see what this looks like. So you can file for previous years if you want to, but we're going to be filing for tax year 2022. As I said, you can file a corrected returns here on this page, which is awful handy as well. Click on next. We have the opportunity to put in W-2s here, but we're not going to do it in this example. We did that during the WT7. We'll click on next. I can add 1099 MISCs. I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is just add a simple example of a 1099 NEC. So if I click on that, it's asking for if the recipient is a business or not, and I'll just leave the default at no. And put some fictitious information in again. And I'll just use the address here for at our building in Madison. And you'd fill out any pertinent information that would normally go on the 1099 NEC. So I'll just put in an amount here. And as we mentioned earlier, what we're doing is we're submitting a 1099 NEC without withholding. So there's the default is 0 on in box 5, and that's what we're going to leave it at. And I'll click on add. So again, if you have multiple 1099s to input here, I can click on save draft, continue editing, and now I'm not going to lose that if it times out, for example. It'll be saving it as a draft. So we could add multiples here if we wanted to. If you did need to go back and edit, you can use the little edit icon here to edit that, go back and edit that 1099 too, or even delete it. So let's click on next. And we don't have any 1099Rs, so we'll skip over that and click on next. And here it takes us to a summary page. So in this particular session, what we've done is we've inputted the information for one 1099 NEC that doesn't have withholding. It's really what this summary page is telling us. So I'm looking good here. So let's click on submit. I'll agree to the terms here, the attestation. And that takes us to the confirmation page. So I've got confirmation that I have indeed submitted a 1099 NEC without withholding via my tax account. And that takes us to the end of what I needed to talk about for my tax account. So I'll throw it back to Jordan for a few closing remarks.
All right, and this is Peyton, not Jordan, so I'll take over from here. I just wanted to thank you, Tom, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any more questions, please use the contact information on the screen. We're going to stick around for a few minutes to finish answering the questions in the queue. There is a brief exit survey when you leave the webinar, but before we go, just a couple reminders for you. Whenever your email or contact information changes, please update it on the Update Profile and Security Contact page. Do not share your login information or password with any other My Tax Account users. If another person in your business would like to have access to your business accounts, please have them register for their own My Tax Account username. A recorded version of the webinar will be available shortly on our training page. Feel free to watch it again or share it with your colleagues who are unable to attend today. Thanks again, and have a good rest of your day.